All right, everybody, welcome to the first installment of the George Cronin Awards for Procurement Excellence webinar series. Our first webinar this year is brought to us by the great state of Florida. It is the Market Analysis and Procurement Strategies, or the MAPS program. This project was awarded the Silver Award this year at our 2019 Cronin Awards. Our presenter is Ms. Rosalind Ingram. Roz has a BS degree in business from Florida State University. She is also a project management professional, a certified public manager, and a Florida certified negotiator. She has 30 years of state government experience and has worked in several agencies to gain her diverse knowledge of state government and best practices in public procurement. The Division of State Purchasing, which is led by Roz, creates state term contracts that leverages all state agency spend, as well as spend that is created through the cities and counties that are able to access them. Her division also provides training for certified contract managers, certified negotiators, and project management professionals. They are also charged with the rule of promulgation and policy initiatives. Roz also manages the My Florida Marketplace e-procurement system. We are very excited to have Roz. She is also our our president-elect in 2020 and will be the NASPO president in 2021. We're excited to have her. I'm going to turn it over to you now, Roz.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you.
Appreciate the intro. Hey, everybody, this is Roz, and this is supposed to go for an hour. My plan is to do a presentation for about 20 minutes, just going through like the down in the dirt stuff, and then I'm hopeful that you will have questions, because I usually do much better when I'm able to interact directly with you guys. Staring at a screen and talking to it's rather awkward, but we're going to give this a shot. So our MAPS process, and the reason we named it MAPS is because we needed an acronym we could remember. We knew it was going to be market research, so we just made it something simple. I will tell you that the market research or market analysis piece drives that second piece, which is the procurement strategy. So moving right into it, there's what's in it for me. So why would you even consider, from whatever state you're in, why would you consider doing this? And there's a lot of reasons to do it. And I think I've talked to a couple of different states that were sort of tentative on it because they didn't want to put that much in a document. But I will tell you that putting this in a document can only help you later on as opposed to hurt you, because if it's data driven and it's very clear cut, it's always defensible. So why did we start? Well, years ago, it was done, but and was called just a market research piece, I believe. And it had a lot of information in it, but it wasn't as articulated as it is now. So we sort of got it and sort of massaged it a little bit. And I'll show you that, and there'll be an example in just a few minutes as well. So number one, it would provide you with options based on data. That is a big deal. But I would tell you that the number 2 item on this list for me was the most important. When I came into this position, there had been 3 procurements that had been done 2 or 3 years before I got here. And there were issues moving forward on a re-solicitation, and nobody could find the reason why they did it that way. So the 2 biggest things are, 1, it gives you a recommendation to move forward, but 2, it gives you a historical perspective that you can then file and have. So when you get ready to do it next time, you pull this up and it's got all this information, and you can make a decision based on what was done before and whether it was successful or not. It also reduces, hey, I wonder if we do it this way, will that be all right? When you have a lot of data involved, then your recommendations become much more simplified, and you can be more strategic about how you're going to source, whether you want to use an ITB, an RFP, or in the state of Florida, we also have a ITN, invitation to negotiate. So it sets whether or not we're going to do a procurement based on a lot of issues we'll talk about on the next slide. So our first decision is, are we going to do it? Next decision is If we've already done it, are we going to renew it? And if we haven't, if we've done it, but it's time to do it again, then how we're going to move forward the next time. So those are sort of the, as you guys know, your basic decisions everybody makes when doing a procurement. The marketplace issue is really important, of understanding what's going on. We leverage Procurement IQ very heavily, and we need to understand as procurement professionals how all of that information flows with the other information in this document. So I will, everything I'm doing here, you guys already do. I think maybe we just put it in a little different format, because everybody, when you, the next slide, you'll see. Now the bottom one is a big deal to us as well as professionals, because occasionally, and well, here recently more than occasionally, I've been getting calls from legislators asking why. Why did you do that? I can back up my method of procurement. I can back up what we did moving forward, show a level playing field, so it takes some of the steam out of an arbitrary argument. So what do we do? And some of you have asked for the document, so you have it. So this is the way it's laid out. We do a background. So the background shows, okay, what do we do? Or if it's new, we say we've never done this. We looked into, maybe we did an RFI. We have information from agencies that say they want something. But the background piece is huge, because it talks about where we are. What did our agencies do? Who's buying it from our state agencies? What political subs are buying off of it? Which vendors are we using? And when we know that, we kind of know whether or not it's been successful. We also look at different ways to engage with our customers, which is coming up on the next slide. But we need that background information. If we don't have it, how are you going to be able to see what you want to do to improve it? And that lends itself right into industry trends. So a couple of years ago, you guys remember the failed attempt for Office Depot and Staples to merge, but that was a big deal for my maps, because that was going to make a huge difference in how we move forward in a procurement. So industries looking at Procurement IQ, what's going on? Is transportation affecting it? That goes into a lot of my maps. When gas goes up, we have to look at whether or not we're going to renew, because as you know, you keep the same terms and conditions, and price can go down but not up. So we have to look at that. And we look at maybe we have mergers and acquisitions. Maybe the market shifted completely into a different technological area, which has happened, as we all know, in every one of our fields, not just technology, but in almost every one of our service contracts. They're way more heavily embedded into technology. So we're having to look at those issues differently. Next, we look at pricing. We look at several different things concerning pricing, which we'll get into on the next slide. Contract factors, those have to do more with what's happened on the contract. Are people happy with the contract? Are we happy with the contract? Have we had a lot of issues, complaints? Maybe we don't have enough selection or offerings, those kinds of things. Risk assessment is, what is the risk of going back out as opposed to renewal? What is the risk of going out at all on something we haven't procured for? And what is the risk of not doing it? So those are all things that we try to lay out in that section. That's usually a smaller section if you're lucky. You don't have as much that goes in there. And then of course, a procurement recommendation on what we want to do based on all of this information. So the way we look at the trends and conditions and the background and all of these other things have to do with how we pull the information. So we pull the information from Procurement IQ, industry trends. We go into associations quite often, and we'll look at trade magazines, and we try to see what we might not have gotten out of Procurement IQ or GovWin. We look at the prior contract spend that I spoke about, and the agency usage and feedback is very big deal to me personally, because when I was in an agency, I felt like I didn't maybe always have a chance to say some of the things I would like to see changed in a contract. So we do several things. We do surveys all the time, but I'm not a survey person. I really get agitated when people send me a bunch of them. So I'm not one of those people, but some of my agencies love the surveys. But if they don't like the surveys, they usually like the focus groups. We'll bring in the top maybe 8 spend agencies and ask them how they like the contract. Was it successful? Was it too broad? Was it too narrow? What can we do to make it better? We also introduced about 4 years ago, I think, agency visits, which I've got to get back into in January. We go to their turf, and I bring a team with me, try to bring a representative from my different areas, and sit down with them, because often you're not going to get the information you want in an email, and you're not going to get it in a group of mixed company. But if you go to them, you often get their true views on things. And it sometimes is painful, but I found that to be a great tool. And we just say, hey, we'll look at it and see if we can make it better. And that one, I wasn't sure how it would go, but I've actually gotten some really good ideas out of that. The vendor sales reports we look at, those are the reports that the vendors send us that don't go through my Florida Marketplace. Right now, just my state agencies go through my Florida Marketplace, and our new procurement coming up, we're going to push hopefully get everybody in there so I can make these sales reports go away, because they'll already be in my system. But those sales reports will tell me, you know, how well we're doing in cities and counties, who's using it, who's not. Then the pricing analysis, we look at lots of stuff for that. So we generally look at California, Texas, and New York, because we're similarly placed in size. Geographic neighbors, we often look at those three. We look at others as well. Cooperatives, of course, and GSA Schedule 70 and 84, because Florida hasn't adopted a CMAS the Texas. We haven't adopted the Texas or California model on that, so we only use those two. And then we look at other ACSs. So does the state of New York have something that we might be able to utilize, as opposed to using resources and going out on something? And we will look at, generally, we look at those states that we have very sort of maybe similar competitive processes to. We try to align as best we can, but often we're able to, with whatever we're doing with a cooperative already, or whatever we have historically. Some things are just going to be a state term contract, because that's the way it is. And because of my vendor pool, it will always be, I will tell you, IT staff aug in the state of Florida, as long as I'm in this position, will be a state term contract, because I've finally gotten it to a place where I have at least 40 certified minority vendors and small businesses out of the 200, and I need it to be there, because it's helpful to small businesses to be able to play on those contracts. So let's take a look at one. Some of them are pretty simple. Some of them are a little more in depth. This one is one of the ones that I would say was a little more in depth. We went into a lot of different areas, some pie charts. You'll see the background, the industry, what we're looking at in the industry, and then we pull where we are on spend, and then which agencies, as you can see from that chart, the pie chart, which agencies are utilizing this particular contract the most. And then we look at the comparisons to those three states, and sometimes that's just in a small, like an Excel looking spreadsheet thing, but sometimes they're like this, because they have to be a lot more detailed. They are done in this fashion, where we can articulate the comparisons, or in some cases, there aren't comparisons, and we say that as well. So normally it looks more like this with U.S. Communities or GSA or NASPO or whichever one it is. And we show what the pricing is according to our pricing. The recommendation is to procure or do not procure, utilize an ACS, which you would refer to as, for us, it's an alternate contract source, but that would be the piggybacking, or cooperative purchasing, or not to procure at all. And sometimes it's not to procure at all. And that's okay. You know, we have, generally speaking, when we get a request to look at a new service, we will have maybe in my purchasing directors meetings is another valuable place to get information. I have those every other month. And I'll say, okay, can you think of another one you'd like us to look at? And sometimes they'll bring one up. So recently we had one on uniforms, and Jess has been working on that. So we were trying to determine whether or not our bang for our buck on uniforms is going to be worth it. So then we will send a survey out to the agencies and say, hey, are you interested in a uniform contract? Because there used to be one, now people are using one and piggybacking off that I have to approve. So do we want to look at that again? And they will send a survey back saying yes or no, we really would rather do our own thing. We don't really want to be included in that. We're okay. So there's a lot of different ways that can happen, but it always comes to us from our agencies. We have vendors. I had 3 this morning. This was a busy day. 3 this morning that wanted me to sign a PA with NASPO on a service we didn't have any interest in. And when I say didn't have any interest in, I'm not saying that specifically. I'm saying no, a state agency has not indicated to us that they have interest in this area. So I told those vendors, if you find different agencies in the state of Florida who are interested and they tell me that, then we will start the process. We don't independently just decide to do a contract. We have to have a declared need. So sort of as a wrap up talking about this, the 3 items on the left are really the top 3. We have a historical record. I can go in at any time and find out through my maps what we did and why we did it. And I can send that downtown if needed, and don't believe you me, you will be doing that. It's driven by data and it's legally defensible. And all of those things in our world are pretty important. So we have a pretty complex market customer review. As I indicated, there's 5 or 6 ways we deal with our customer base to try to figure out what's happening in the market, how happy they are with the contract and how they would like it to change, the pricing analysis, the risk assessment, and then the recommendation. So that is basically what it is. I have sent out to probably 10 states, a simplified one and a complex one, just to show some of them aren't as fleshed out as the one I just showed you. Some of them are simple, but it still has enough data in there to show us what we need to do. Now, I will tell you, on every single procurement we do in state purchasing, we have a MAPS, every single one. So that may or may not be resource driven for you guys, because mine, I delegated, or this office delegated to sister agencies many moons ago, 30 years ago, the ability for them to do their own procurements. This is for my state term contracts and my alternate contract sources. That's what this process handles. So for some insane reason, I have some small insurance contracts that we do. We do a MAPS for those. And we have anything, most of our contracts that we put into play are over $1 million, or we don't really mess with them. If it's one agency doing it, we just let that agency do it. There's no need for us to get involved. And in fact, they like doing one if it's specific to them. But we have several that want to do it, then we will look at it. And then we will do a MAPS to show what that need is, because we will show the survey results in there. So I've been talking nonstop for 20 minutes. Hope I have an active microphone, or maybe not. Are there any questions?
Yes, Roz, we've had a couple come into the question and answer box. So just as a reminder for all the participants, if you would like to ask Roz a question, please type it into that question and answer box. I'm going to go through the ones that are there now, and then I've got a couple of my own that I'd like to ask. So first, Roz, we have a question from Sarah Stone. She would like to know, would you be willing to share examples for different books of business, professional services, IT, commodities, construction, etc.?
Absolutely. Now, we don't do construction in my shop. It's in a different area because it's a different statute. But I'm happy to pull from IT, goods, services, if you will send me a list of the ones you're interested in, then I can get you the ones I do. And if there is one that happens to be in professional services, that's handled differently because that's a pre-qualified list. So we do that a little bit differently, but send me the ones you're interested in, or even an idea about that different grouping, and I'll send you as many as you would like.
And if you would actually like to view the write-up that went with this submission for the Cronin Award this last year, you can always view that on NASPO.org on the Cronin Awards page. Our next question, Roz, that we have is also from Sarah. She would like to know, since the inception of this program, have you seen an increase in public records requests for the maps?
Actually, that's a very good question. I don't think, other than holistically through a protest, maybe, actually we've only had one protest in 5 years. So our public records usually surround more detailed information, and they would only look at a maps if they were probably going to protest a solicitation. I'm sorry, I'm trying to think this through as I'm talking, but no, we have not. Downtown has asked for it.
That's great. Our next question comes from Janet P. in Georgia, and she would like to know, Roz, how do you make a political assessment? Is this written down? Do you include it in the map?
You're adorable. No, it is not, but it is in the discussion. So we go to our leadership. Is the only time leadership really gets involved in a solicitation. They approve the maps. Once that's done, then the solicitation document itself, all the way through the process and to award, I sign everything up to 10 million, and then anything above that, my chief of staff gets. But when we go downstairs to talk about the maps is when we lay out that information. And I will say probably 25% of the time, it's a significant part of the conversation. The rest of the time, like on commodities, not so much. Very rarely. It did come up a little bit on vehicles this last time, but primarily it's on services. But we do that in the context of that room as we're discussing it. Now, if it's something clear cut and global that everybody already knows, we might put it in there. In other words, we might put something in if there was like the tariff issue or something like that hasn't come down granularly to us yet. We might say it could be impacted by that sort of thing. But no, we do not put that in this document.
I think that was a great question, Janet, because that brings up that element that we all know that we have to interact with whenever we're working in public procurement.
Yes.
Our next question is going to come from John Hall. And John wants to know, how long does it take to do the review, and how do you get the data from other states?
Okay, those are two very good questions. Matter of fact, one of them has been asked every time I've done this. The resource pull, all right, there's two levels of this. The first level is the training piece. And I will tell you that is a little bit of a struggle up front, because what tends to happen is when you have employees, you show how to do this process, they tend to take one they did before and cut and paste, and that's not how this works. Because one widget doesn't fit in another maps because they're different. So the training piece on how to develop your staff to be curious, and honestly, that's the best word to develop training in the maps, is they have to be curious to figure out what options are and how the trends are going. So the first step is training. It took us about a year and a half, really. And I would say even now, as we bring new people on, we spend a good bit of time on the maps because it drives the whole process. Now, the actual time frame on the maps depends on the product or service. So if you were doing tires, we have sourced that through NASPO the last 2 or 3 times. That maps is very simple. We go and pull the spend data. We go and pull the agency data. We still look at trends and conditions on who's out there, but those don't change much over time. You've got the top 3 and a 4th one occasionally that we pull in. So, excuse me, that maps probably on the creator side, not on the review side, but on the creator side might only take a week among their other duties. Once it leaves that desk, it goes to their supervisor, then the bureau chief, then my deputy director, and then I get it. But that all happens once the immediate supervisor is happy with, then it goes to the bureau chief. When it comes up the next 2 steps, it goes very quickly unless there's something that just stands out. So I would say from cradle to grave on a simple one, 2.5 weeks. But on one of these others, it could be a month or more, depending on what you've got to pull, how you've got to massage the data. The information we get from the other states can be done several ways. Normally, if accessible, and it is usually, we just go to their website and pull it. We can pull the price sheets, generally. Now, when they're not available, then sometimes we make inquiries to that state. And sometimes we just, if it's not available, it's not available. And we say that. But what happens more often than not is for for instance, our vehicle contract, we have very aggressive pricing on our vehicle contract, but we can't compare it to California because California doesn't have tag, text, title, destination. Ours includes everything, delivery. So I can't compare the two. So I just didn't do it on that one. But when I have one I can compare it to, I can see how we're doing. Do you have a follow? And let me know if you have a follow-up on that. I might have gone off track.
I was gonna say, I felt my follow-up question to that, Roz, would be when you make the price inquiry to the different state, who do you normally direct that to? Do you direct it towards that state CPO? Do you reach, maybe some deep-seated state staff? Who do you normally direct that to?
Well, like I said, most of the time we're able to pull it right off the website. We don't bother anybody. But if we're going to bother someone, usually it's in the procurement office. I don't, because I haven't done one in a while. Sorry, I haven't actually done one in a couple of years. They wouldn't go to the CPO. They probably try to figure out from the org chart who's got that area.
Looks like we have another question. This is from Meg in the great state of Connecticut. She is with the Supplier Diversity Program. She wants to know, how do you incorporate the small and minority-owned businesses program into the MAPS process? Is there a bullet that maybe addressed this that we didn't quite catch, or is this thought included in the MAP review section and not an afterthought?
It depends on a couple of things. Like for my IT staff aug, it was in the MAPS because I put in there that we were going to award by job class or job title, which we had 130 of, and we're going to award up to 200 vendors for each of those 130 job classes. That was a spreadsheet from hell. But when we did that, made that determination, that allowed small businesses that were niche companies that probably only wanted to bid on 4 or 5 of those areas under staff aug to be able to bid, and that's how we got many of them in there. What drives our OSD, or Office of Supplier Diversity initiatives, are the solicitation itself. So that's not, you're right, it's not heavy, Meg, it's not heavy in the MAPS, it's heavy in the solicitation. Now, we are not a set-aside state, but we have language in our contracts, language in the solicitation that encourages minority and small business spend and subcontracting spend that addresses those things as well. But it does not, it's not normally affected through the MAPS process for Florida.
Looks like I have another question here from John Hall. And John's wanting to know, does this review help identify cost drivers? Has it resulted in cost savings in your contracts?
I believe that it does identify cost drivers because, as I indicated on one, and actually that gasoline thing affects quite a few of our contracts. So I would say you can, through Procurement IQ and in some trade magazines and different data that we look at, we can see some of those ways that it's driving. Also through a new initiative, and for Florida, and I'm sure for many other states, cloud, the emergence of cloud is going to be a cost driver dependent on usage and swing of data. So we're having to look at where we're loading up high on data, where we're low on data, where those costs are going to come in during our fiscal year, that kind of thing. And what was the second part of the question? I'm sorry.
You're fine. The second part was, has it resulted in cost savings in your contracts?
I believe that it has, but that's based on the decisioning, not on anything specific from the MAPS. In other words, the information we've been able to gather and make a determination to move forward, whether it's on a multiple award or a single award, which is often a way to drive costs and to get cheaper pricing. I have not got, John, I don't have hard data to support, because since I've been here, we've been doing this. So I don't know, I guess I could look back at some older contracts. But for me, it has, even though that isn't a very important position for us to be in, where we know our numbers are good and we're saving money, for me, the MAPS has more to do with the process and the correct way to do the process and why we're doing the process. And I think those things do end up saving us money. And I wish I had better data to tell you on that. I just don't.
Well, I've got a couple questions, if you don't mind, Ross. We can keep this going while our participants are thinking of some more questions. I'd like for you to maybe talk to me a little bit about, it sounds like you've been doing maps, for a couple of years, for quite a few years. I would like you to talk to me about how has your maps process changed over time? Maybe do you include a section now that you didn't include in the beginning, but experience taught you that it needed to be a section? What kind of changes from the inception of this project to the way that we see it now? Like, what have you seen happen? What have you seen change?
It absolutely has changed. The pricing mechanism, the way we do our comparisons to other similar states was not there before. The risk assessment section was not there before. The way we do our industry trends and our searches has really become more professionalized with Procurement IQ and GovWin, and because before we were using more industry data, which was more industry mags and that kind of thing. So I think that we've perfected a lot of the background information based on the new tools that we have. So I would say that has changed. The fact that we can do our dashboards a little better now so that we have our graphics, that wasn't there before. And graphics, when you go downstairs, when I walk downstairs to my leadership and I have graphics, it makes my life, I can't begin to tell you how much easier, because they don't want to read anything. They read things all day long. And if they can see a snapshot of it, it really helps. So I've asked staff where they can to put simplified graphs or pie charts, anything that is easy to the on the eyes for them to be able to determine how we got to where we are.
And I know that the answer to this question is going to vary, but I would say, give me some examples. So from start to finish, when you are doing a map for a procurement, and I know that's going to be based on the size of the procurement, how long would you say that normally takes, and how much staff do you need to delegate to complete it?
Well, we have trained everyone in my procurement proper staff. In other words, they are procurement folks. They're not working in contract management. I think I have 15 or 16 in here. My brain is foggy right now on that, but every one of them can do a maps. Some of them are less proficient as they begin, and they have to have time and experience with different ones to get better at it. But they do the bulk of the work. And as I had said before, I think 2 weeks to 6 weeks probably is pretty reasonable. And the 2 week is aggressive, but if it's a simple maps, it can go through the review process very quickly. The only stop, sometimes it might take a little more time, is to get it to leadership, because it's difficult sometimes to get in. But I have also begun to send different levels of folks down there. I don't go down there with the maps anymore. I'm trying to push it down several levels so they have interaction with them and they gain confidence in their information that they're presenting to leadership. Once that initial person does it, really any major feedback would come from their immediate supervisor, and then lesser from their bureau chief, and then it comes up very quickly.
So what I'm hearing you say is that every member of your staff is trained on how to prepare the maps. You may just have some that have a certain niche for it more so than others. Would that be a true statement?
Yes.
Interesting. That's fascinating. Now, I have another question. We have another question just came in from Janet. She would like to know, do you prepare a maps to use a consortium?
Yes. For any procurement, because I have to state why I'm doing it. And I have all the same, if you think about it, all the same data's got to be in there. The agency spend, agency feedback, whether or not they like maybe it's a state-term contract now and we end up going to a cooperative. And yes, absolutely, we do a maps for every single procurement. And that's considered a procurement.
You actually kind of brought up something in your last answer there, Roz, which was another question that I had, and it's something that I know is near and dear to your heart, and that is customer service. And you talked about engaging different agencies for their feedback. What recommendations would you make to our participants on engaging those agencies to get to the heart of the feedback that you need? Maybe not necessarily what you want, but what you need to know for the better procurement. What are some tactics that you would recommend to them?
Well, the ones that I had talked about earlier, I really believe the important thing is some people like less interaction. So you'll have some agencies that would just prefer to do a survey or to send a representative to a focus group. But I believe very strongly in personal communication. I think that you get a lot more out of somebody if you take the extra step to go to them. So that's why I brought up the agency visits. We go to them, we have purchasing directors meetings. We have trainings quite often. We have trainings for My Florida Marketplace and for FCM and FCN, and we bring up different items there on these same types of questions. So the more you can personalize it with your agencies, I can't tell you what kind of bang for my buck I've gotten out of that instead of just doing the surveys. And again, 20 to 30% like the surveys, but the rest of them don't. They don't turn them in. They'd rather me talk to them.
As you're engaging these agencies for their feedback, do you normally have maybe a set of feedback questions that you personalize for each agency? Or do you just kind of go in there and you know what you're trying to get out of them and you're feeling it out?
No, I personalize it because I usually know which agencies are struggling with which contracts. First of all, they're not shy, and I'm sure nobody on this phone has shy agencies that are dealing with them. So they will let you know, but I think you have to take the fear out of it and engage them head on. In other words, listen to them, because you know what? I was where they were and I got frustrated with state purchasing. I got frustrated because I didn't think they were listening to me. So at least if I think you're listening to me and you're looking right at me, then I think that when you tell me something I don't want to hear, that's okay. I can take it back. And often, I would tell you, in the last couple agency visits I did, we got some really good ideas that we brought back. We don't know everything.
So talk to me a little bit, Roz, about the format of maps. So how you actually decided on the format that you used. Did you go through a series of trial and error? Did you learn some lessons to make some improvements? Can you kind of touch on those and talk about why you use the format that you do?
Well, the logic of the initial one was just, what did we do before? How much money did we spend? And what do you want to do now? That was the basis of the original document. What we did was crystallize different areas and break them out. So we have the background, but that has agency spend, vendor spend. And so we have made it more detailed, yet try to keep it high level enough not to let anybody get, buried in the weeds. We did the same thing with our price analysis. We fleshed that out and we're able to back it up. I would tell you the changes we have made, the only changes we have allowed to happen are those that are defensible. So keep that in mind. If you want to change something, just know that this document is supposed to be used as a data-driven tool. So even though you're going to have to massage your recommendation based on how you know your user agencies and how you know your vendor pool, most of the decision-making should come directly from that data.
That's a great answer, Roz. My next question would be, I know that you've touched on how you guys, use maps for every procurement, all the way down. So my question is, do you mandate that as a matter of policy within the office? Is it a regulation? Was it a statute that you had to lobby and say, hey guys, listen, I know what's best. This is what needs to be done. This needs to be crystallized. Can you talk to me about how you incorporated that into being being a part of every procurement? Because that's a big thing.
Well, but remember, it's state purchasing, so we only have 88 large agreements. We have 800 vendors on those agreements, but we have 88 large agreements. So the the ones that are happening outside of that at my agencies, several of my agencies have adopted the maps, but not all of them. They do their own thing, and that's fine. If they're comfortable with it and can defend it, that's what they do. But we do this by, it's not even a policy, it's just a mandate. I made another, let's see, 2 administrations back. I said, I want to do this, and they said, thou shalt be done. So that's how it happened. It is not in granite anywhere. We don't have to do it by law or rule or policy, but it is my internal policy. And I have gotten everyone is so comfortable with having additional information and not having to read a solicitation, not having to go through all that, that they're very comfortable with doing it this way.
So if you were going to, let's say a state really wanted to try to adopt this policy, and they were trying to adopt it, or try to adopt this process, I should say, the MAPS process, and they were wanting to do it maybe on a smaller scale at first. What 3 recommendations would you give to them? And is there maybe a particular commodity that you would recommend that they start with, or maybe a certain threshold that you would recommend that they start with? What 3 big recommendations would you offer if they're trying to implement this within their own state?
That is a great question, and I have an answer for you. I believe that if I were not already doing this across the board, I would probably do these 3 things. I would probably pick a threshold above, I don't know, every state's a different size, so I know everybody's buying things at different levels, but I would probably pick anything over 5 million maybe. Not anything, I'd say I would set it at 5 million. I would look at in services first. Commodities are much simpler, if you will. So if you're going to just partially adopt, I think it would be services driven, because that's the area that you have the most vagueness that surrounds it, if you will, and they can be more complicated. So I would say those are the top 2 things. I would start with services. I would do it over 5 million, and I would do it for something that hasn't historically caused you an issue. Those are the 3, if I was starting slow.
That's a really good point, Roz. Now, I have another question, and this kind of relates, I guess, back into where you include certain information within the maps, because I know that from where you have been doing this, you went through trial and error. You found out what's going to work best. So information like preference, a state, your state's preferences, whether you're including, the small or minority-owned businesses, where do you include that kind of information within your maps? In which section do you include it? And do you always include it, or do you only include it if you find it applicable to it?
We really don't, as far as small business and minority driven spend, it really doesn't enter the maps, with the one exception I spoke about. It would be in the solicitation document and throughout the procurement, and then the resulting contract if awarded. These are big. What we do in our maps, and everybody could look at adopting it different, and maybe particularly if you have a set aside, it might be a great section to put in here. But for us, it is not, we are not looking at who we want the vendors to be. We're looking at what the vendor pool is now, what the market looks like, what the spend is, and how we believe that's going to move forward. This is just not the document we do that in.
Thank you, Roz. You as always, you're absolutely wonderful. I guess, all right, guys, I just did a last call for questions. We'll give it I'll keep talking here for a couple more seconds to see if anybody else has any other questions out there they'd like to put into the question and answer box. In the meantime,
feel free to send me anything on your own. You guys don't have to do it through this forum if you don't want to.
Because Roz is wonderful.
Well, it's easier. Sometimes people don't want to ask, they don't want to ask questions in the public thing, and feel free to contact me. I'll help you all I can.
Thank you. Thank you, Roz. Everyone, I would like to thank you for all of your time today, for participating in the webinar, for coming and listening to my voice and for all the learning that we've done from Roz. Roz, I would like to thank you for your time. I know how incredibly busy you are. When I was going through your bio, I think I read 6 different certifications that you either teach, have, or make sure that everyone has. I know how busy you are. I really appreciate it, Roz.
It's been fun. I love talking about, as people who know me, I love talking about market research. So anything I can do to help, if anybody wants to embark on this, I'm happy to help.
And, you know, guys, something that Roz kind of briefly touched on when she was talking about market research, here at NASPO, we do offer 2 market research subscriptions for our members. We offer GovWin and Procurement IQ. If you have not accessed those and you would like access, you can feel free to reach out to me. You can reach out to Kevin Miner, who is at kminer@naspo.org, and we will talk to you about it and we'll get you set up. As long as there's no other questions, and it doesn't look like I have any coming in, thank you all so much. As a reminder, if you would like your UPPCC contact hour, please shoot me an email, ldenhart@naspo.org. I am always here to help. I really appreciate everyone. Roz, once again, I cannot thank you enough for your time. I really cannot.
I really had fun. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Roz. Thank you to all of our participants. You guys have been great. I really appreciate it.